I had always considered myself a keen observer, a trait that served me well in my line of work as a freelance journalist. My stories often delved into the obscure and the overlooked, the kind of pieces that made you look twice at the ordinary world around you. But nothing had prepared me for the oddity that unfolded right in my suburban neighborhood. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly, with the house across the street. The Hendersons lived there, a middle-aged couple of no particular note, their lives as mundane as their two-story home. But one morning, as I sipped my coffee by the window, I noticed something peculiar about their house. It seemed to have one more window than I remembered. At first, I brushed it off as a trick of the light or a lapse in my own observation. But as days passed, the anomaly became undeniable. Each morning, there appeared to be one more window on the Hendersons' house than the day before. I mentioned it casually to friends and family, but they laughed it off, suggesting I needed a break from my work. Yet, the mystery gnawed at me. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was deeply wrong. It was this curiosity, this insatiable need to uncover the truth, that led me down a path I could never have imagined, into a world where reality itself seemed to warp and twist. My obsession grew as the days passed. I found myself sketching the Hendersons' house, trying to map out the impossible architecture that unfolded before my eyes. Each new window seemed to appear randomly, altering the facade in subtle but unnerving ways. The house began to look less like a suburban home, and more like a grotesque puzzle, each window a piece that didn't quite fit. One evening, under the guise of a casual stroll, I ventured closer to the house. The street was quiet, the twilight casting long shadows across the neatly trimmed lawns. As I approached, a chill ran down my spine. The new windows were not just architectural anomalies, they emitted a faint, unsettling light, as if something within was beckoning me. I stood there, on the sidewalk, staring at the house. The windows varied in shape and size, some small and round, others large and arched. But it was the light that unnerved me the most. It was neither the warm glow of household lamps, nor the sterile brightness of LEDs. It was otherworldly, shimmering with colors I couldn't name. That night, I lay awake, my mind racing with questions. What was happening inside that house? Who or what was responsible for the changing facade? And why did it feel like the windows were watching me, waiting for something? My journalistic instinct told me there was a story here, something far bigger and stranger than anything I'd ever covered. Little did I know, my curiosity was about to lead me into the depths of a mystery far darker and more dangerous than any story I had ever chased. In the days that followed, my life began to twist into a narrative I no longer controlled. Objects in my house, books, keys, even my coffee mug would move or disappear without explanation. At night, I heard whispers, faint and unintelligible, as if carried by a wind that didn't exist. And the shadows in my home lingered longer, clinging to the corners with an almost palpable presence. Driven by a mix of fear and fascination, I started researching the history of the Hendersons' house. The local library held a trove of old newspapers and property records, painting a picture of the house's past. It was built in the early 1900s by a reclusive architect, Arthur Langley, whose designs were as eccentric as they were rare. Rumors swirled about Langley's dabbling in occult practices, his obsession with otherworldly architecture, and his sudden, unexplained disappearance. The Hendersons themselves were an enigma. They rarely left the house, and on the few occasions I saw them, their appearances struck me as odd. Their skin was too pale, their movements too rigid, as if they were poorly animated characters in a simulation. Their eyes, when they met mine, were void of emotion, sending a shiver down my spine. Each new revelation added layers to the mystery, but offered no answers. The windows continued to multiply, each new one a silent sentinel to the madness unfolding within. I felt like a moth drawn to a flame, knowing the danger, but unable to resist the pull. One evening, as I sat in my living room, trying to piece together the scattered fragments of information, a realization hit me. The whispers I heard at night, the shifting shadows, the sense of being watched had all intensified whenever I thought about the house. It was as if my attention, my fear and curiosity, were feeding something. And then, the most disturbing change occurred. I woke one morning to find a new window on the wall of my own bedroom, a small, circular pane that hadn't been there the night before. It looked out onto a landscape I couldn't recognize, a twisted, nightmarish version of my own neighborhood, bathed in an eerie, ethereal light. The sight of that window in my own home was the final push I needed. I had to know what was inside the Hendersons' house. I had to understand the force that was altering my reality. That night, I made up my mind to enter the house and uncover its secrets, no matter the cost. It was a decision that would lead me into the heart of darkness, into a world where the boundaries of reality were as malleable as clay, and just as easily shattered. The night I chose to enter the Hendersons' house was cloaked in a suffocating silence, the kind that amplifies every heartbeat and breath. Armed with nothing but a flashlight and a pounding heart, I approached the house. The multitude of windows glowed faintly, like eyes in the dark, watching my every move. I found one of the newer windows unlocked. Drawing a deep breath, I slid it open and climbed inside. The room I entered was unfamiliar, starkly different from the mundane interior I had glimpsed through the windows in the past. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with ancient, leather-bound books, their titles etched in languages I couldn't understand. As I ventured deeper, the house revealed its impossible nature. Corridors twisted in on themselves, staircases led to ceilings, and rooms were larger on the inside than they appeared from the outside. The laws of physics seemed to have been rewritten within these walls. In one room, a grand piano played itself, the keys moving with a frenzied urgency, but producing no sound. In another, a series of mirrors reflected not my image, but scenes of other places, other times some idyllic, others nightmarish. I realized then that the house was not just a structure, it was a living, breathing entity, its rooms and hallways an extension of its consciousness. And it was aware of me, its corridors reshaping and reorienting to guide me, or perhaps to trap me. Finally, I found myself in a vast, dimly lit chamber, the heart of the house. In the center stood a figure, its form blurred and shifting, a spectral amalgamation of architect and abomination. It was Arthur Langley, or what remained of him, absorbed and transformed by his own creation. He spoke, his voice a chorus of whispers, echoing around the room. He told me of his quest to transcend the mundane, to create a space where the physical and the ethereal merged. His experiments had opened a doorway, but instead of finding enlightenment, he had become a prisoner, his consciousness bound to the ever-changing house. As he spoke, the windows around us shimmered with otherworldly light, revealing fleeting glimpses of distant worlds, horrors, and beauties beyond comprehension. I understood then that the house was a nexus, a point where multiple realities converged, fueled by the thoughts and emotions of those it ensnared. Langley's final words were a warning and a plea. He told me that the house would continue to grow, to ensnare, driven by the curiosity and fear of others. He begged me to leave, to forget the house and let it fade into obscurity. But as I turned to leave, I felt the house's grip tighten. The corridors twisted violently, the windows flickered with malevolent intensity. It was not going to let me go easily. The house had fed on my curiosity, grown stronger with my attention, and now it craved more. With every ounce of willpower, I raced through the shifting halls, the house groaning and screeching around me. I reached the window through which I had entered and hurled myself out, tumbling onto the lawn. Lying there, gasping for breath, I watched as the house returned to its normal, suburban facade, its windows no longer glowing. But the terror I felt was not relieved, it was compounded by the knowledge of what lay behind that ordinary exterior. In the days that followed, I tried to return to my normal life, but the experience had left a deep scar. I saw the house in my dreams, its windows multiplying, its corridors twisting. I avoided looking at it, but its presence was always there, at the edge of my vision, a constant reminder of the night I had barely escaped. My perception of the world had been irrevocably altered. Windows everywhere seemed to whisper secrets, buildings appeared to change when I looked away. The mundane world I had once inhabited now seemed like a thin veneer over a reality much stranger and more terrifying. I attempted to write about my experience, to exercise it through words, but the story seemed too fantastical, too unhinged. Who would believe a tale of a house that defied the laws of nature, of an architect consumed by his own creation? The Hendersons remained elusive, their presence in the neighborhood like a silent accusation. I wondered if they were prisoners like Langley, or something else entirely, a part of the house's machinations. I wanted to warn others, to tell them to stay away from the house, but I feared drawing more attention to it. I feared that my obsession might feed it further, might lead others down the same dark path I had walked. And so, I live with the knowledge of what exists within that ordinary house, of the entity that lurks behind its ever-multiplying windows. The house appears normal to everyone else, but I can still see the extra windows, each one a dark watchful eye. But the true horror came one quiet morning, when I awoke to find a window in my own house that didn't belong. A small oval window, high on the wall of my bedroom, looking out onto a world that wasn't mine. I keep the curtain closed, try to ignore the faint light that seeps through the edges, but I know it's there. A part of me wonders what I would see if I dared to look, to gaze into that other world. And in that wondering, I feel the house's influence, a silent siren call to return to its labyrinthine halls, to uncover its secrets. But I resist, for I know that some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. The window remains, a silent sentinel, a reminder of the night I glimpsed beyond the veil of reality, and of the fact that, whatever lies behind those multiplying windows, it is still out there, waiting.